A dog abandons her white puppy for looking different. And what happened next made the world cry. At first, it seemed like a heartbreaking story of a mother rejecting her own child. But then something far darker is uncovered. This tiny white puppy wasn't just left behind. He was targeted. Behind the viral video, a shocking truth hides one that twists everything you thought you knew. As danger closes in, lives hang in the balance, and the fight for this puppy's survival will expose secrets no one saw coming. Why was this innocent life really cast away? And what will it take to save him before it's too late? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Thunder rumbled across the dark Missouri sky as rain pelted against Greer Halstead's kitchen window. She wrapped her hands around a steaming mug of coffee, trying to ward off the early morning chill. Her phone buzzed again, another notification from the animal welfare community she followed online. Greer's weathered fingers swiped across the screen, and her sharp gray eyes narrowed at the video that began to play. The footage was shaky, clearly taken on someone's phone, showing a mother dog and her litter of newborn puppies. Most of the pups were gathered close, nursing contentedly, but one stood out, a tiny snow-white puppy, struggling to get close to its mother. The mother dog kept nudging the white puppy away with her nose, pushing it to the edge of the whelping box. Each time the little one tried to return, she'd block it with her body. The comments below the video were filled with laughing emojis and cruel jokes about the rejected runt, but something else caught Greer's attention. Behind the whelping box, partially visible in the dim barn lighting, was a familiar logo burned into the wooden wall, a stylized BC inside a horseshoe. Her stomach tightened. She'd seen that mark before, at auctions and county fairs. Boone Collister's brand. Well, she muttered, setting down her coffee. Collister was one of the biggest breeders in 3 counties, known for his perfect puppies that sold for thousands of dollars. He'd always managed to dodge the few complaints that had come through her office, usually with a generous donation to the right official or a friendly chat with the right council member. The rain intensified outside as Greer pulled up the timestamp on the video. Posted just 6 hours ago, around midnight. She glanced at her watch, 5:30 in the morning. The animal welfare office wouldn't open for another 3 hours, but that white puppy couldn't wait. Not if what she suspected was true. She'd seen this before with other breeders, puppies that didn't match breed standards, being culled from the litter one way or another. The thought made her jaw clench. Greer grabbed her heavy-duty rain jacket from its hook by the door, checking the pockets for her badge and official inspection papers. The drive to Collister's farm would take 45 minutes in good weather. In this storm, longer. But she couldn't shake the image of that tiny white puppy, pushed away from its mother's warmth. How many times had she arrived too late, finding only empty kennels and vague explanations? Her work boots squelched in the mud as she hurried to her truck. The old Ford's engine growled to life, wipers fighting against the downpour. Greer pulled up the farm's address on her phone. She'd been there twice before on routine inspections, both times finding everything suspiciously perfect. As she navigated the slick country roads, memories of past cases weighed heavy on her mind. The burned-out barn where a problematic stallion had been kept. The empty cattle pen where a 3-legged calf had once stood. Always accidents, always explained away with Boone's easy smile and thick envelope of cash for the investigating officer. Not this time, Greer said to herself, knuckles white on the steering wheel as lightning split the sky. She'd transferred to Riverton 3 years ago, leaving behind a comfortable position in Kansas City for this rural post. Some called it a step down, but she'd seen too many animals fall through the cracks in big city bureaucracy. Out here, she could make a difference if she moved fast enough. The storm grew fiercer as she turned onto the long gravel drive leading to Collister's property. Through the gray sheets of rain, She could make out the massive barn where he kept his prize breeding stock. The fancy new ranch house sat dark and quiet on the hill above it. Greer parked near the barn's side entrance, away from the main drive. She didn't want headlights or engine noise giving her away. The morning was still dark enough that she might catch them unprepared, before they had time to hide anything or anyone. Water streamed from her jacket as she made her way to the barn door. The familiar BC brand was mounted above it, metal gleaming dully in a flash of lightning. Greer took out her flashlight and official inspection papers, squaring her shoulders. She could already hear dogs barking inside, their voices rising above the storm. Her hand reached for the door handle, then paused. Was she really going to do this? Show up unannounced before dawn based on a viral video? It could cost her her job if Collister complained to the right people. He had friends in the county government, people who could make her life very difficult. But that little white puppy's face floated in her mind, confused, desperate to reach its mother's warmth. How many others had there been? How many more would there be if no one took a stand? The handle turned easily under her grip. Unlocked. They weren't expecting visitors this early. The door creaked open, bringing a rush of warm air thick with the smell of hay and dogs. Greer switched on her flashlight, its beam cutting through the shadowy interior. Somewhere in this barn, a puppy needed help. And Greer Halstead had sworn an oath to protect the vulnerable, no matter who their owner might be. She stepped inside, letting the heavy door swing shut behind her. The interior of the barn was eerily quiet compared to the raging storm outside. Her flashlight beam swept across rows of pristine kennels, each labeled with breeding information and prices that made her head spin. Everything looked perfect, too perfect, like a show house staged for wealthy buyers. But the video had shown a different part of the operation, something behind the scenes. Greer moved deeper into the barn, following the sound of soft whimpers coming from a back corner. Her boots made no sound on the rubber floor mats as she approached a partially hidden door marked "Whelping Area, Authorized Personnel Only." She took a deep breath, adjusted her badge, and reached for the handle. Whatever she found on the other side, she was ready to face it. The morning storm had led her here for a reason, and she wasn't leaving until she found that snow-white puppy. Greer's old pickup truck bounced along the muddy back road, wipers fighting against the relentless rain. The direction she'd pieced together from the viral video led her to this remote stretch of Boone Collister's sprawling property. Even through the downpour, she could make out the distinctive red barn in the distance, the same one that had appeared in the background of that troubling footage. The truck's headlights cut through the gray morning as she pulled onto a gravel access road. Something didn't sit right about that video. After 15 years of animal welfare work, Greer had developed a sixth sense about these things. The way the mother dog had acted, the timing of the upload, it all felt staged. She parked near a rusty gate and pulled on her weatherproof jacket. The rain drummed against her hood as she stepped out into the storm. Water rushed through the drainage ditches on either side of the road, swollen from hours of rainfall. Greer clicked on her heavy-duty flashlight and began scanning the property. That's when she heard it, a faint whimper, barely audible above the storm. Greer froze, straining to pinpoint the sound. There it was again, coming from somewhere near the flooded culvert beneath the access road. Her heart pounding, Greer scrambled down the muddy embankment. The normally placid drainage pipe was now a torrent of muddy water. She dropped to her hands and knees, shining her light into the culvert's opening. The beam caught something white against the dark water. "Oh God," she whispered, her throat tightening. The white puppy from the video was there, tied to a brick with crude twine, struggling to keep its tiny head above the rising water. Without hesitation, Greer belly crawled into the culvert. Icy water soaked through her clothes as she inched forward. The pup's cries grew more desperate as it fought against the current. Greer could see now that it was a male, no more than a few weeks old. "Hold on, little one," she called out, her voice echoing in the metal pipe. I'm coming. The rushing water pulled at her body as she stretched toward the puppy. Her fingers brushed against his wet fur, but he was just out of reach. Greer forced herself forward another few inches, her shoulders scraping against the culvert's sides. Finally, her hand closed around the pup's small body. He was shivering violently, his white coat plastered to his skin. The twine had cut into his belly where it secured him to the brick. Greer fumbled for the rescue knife on her belt, fighting to keep both herself and the puppy steady against the current. Almost there, she murmured, sawing at the twine with one hand while cradling the pup with the other. The water was rising faster now, lapping at the puppy's chin. His cries had weakened to quiet whimpers. The twine snapped free just as a surge of water rushed through the culvert. Greer clutched the puppy to her chest and kicked backward, desperate to get them both out before the pipe flooded completely. Her boots scrabbled against the slick metal as she pushed herself out into the rain. Gasping, she crawled up the embankment and collapsed on the muddy grass. The white puppy lay trembling in her arms, but he was alive. Greer quickly examined him, her trained eyes taking in his condition. Besides the raw marks from the twine, he seemed physically intact, but he was dangerously cold. This was no accident, she said grimly, noting how deliberately the twine had been tied. Someone had meant for this puppy to drown in the storm. The viral video, the timing, it had all been carefully orchestrated. Greer wrapped the pup in her jacket and ran for her truck. The nearest emergency vet was 20 minutes away in good weather. She cranked up the heat and settled the puppy on her passenger seat, tucking her spare blanket around him. You're going to make it, she told him firmly, pulling onto the main road. I'm calling you, Ledger, because someone needs to account for what was done to you. The puppy's blue eyes blinked up at her trustingly. Despite everything he'd been through, there was still a gentle calmness about him. Greer pressed down on the accelerator, her windshield wipers fighting the storm as she raced toward help. Every few seconds, she glanced over at Ledger. His white fur was starting to fluff up as it dried, making him look like a tiny cloud. He hadn't made a sound since she'd rescued him, which worried her. Most puppies his age would be vocal, especially after trauma. Hang in there, buddy, she murmured, taking a turn faster than she should have. The truck's tires splashed through deep puddles as she navigated the country roads. Her mind was already spinning with the implications of what she'd found. This wasn't just animal cruelty, it was calculated, premeditated. Someone had tried to eliminate evidence by drowning this puppy during the storm. Finally, the lights of River Valley Veterinary Clinic came into view. Greer pulled into the empty parking lot and scooped up Ledger, blanket and all. She burst through the clinic's front door, setting off the bell above it. I need help, she called out, her voice echoing in the quiet waiting room. I've got a critical puppy. Dr. Sarah Chun emerged from the back, taking in Greer's soaked appearance and the small bundle in her arms. The vet's eyes widened as she recognized the animal welfare officer. Greer? What happened? Found him tied to a brick in a flooded culvert, Greer explained quickly, following Dr. Chun into an exam room. He's hypothermic, possible water inhalation, and there's some tissue damage from the twine they used. The vet's face hardened as she gently unwrapped Ledger. Someone did this deliberately? Yes, Greer said grimly, and I intend to find out who. But first, we need to make sure he survives. Dr. Chun worked quickly, assessing Ledger's vital signs while her assistant brought in warming equipment. The puppy remained unusually quiet throughout the examination, watching them with those striking blue eyes. He's not responding to sounds, Dr. Chun noted, snapping her fingers near Ledger's ears. Have you noticed that? Greer shook her head. I was more focused on getting him here. You think he's deaf? It's common in white puppies with blue eyes. It's linked to the genetics that cause that coloring. That might be why someone ... The vet trailed off, her lips pressing into a thin line. Why someone tried to kill him, Greer finished. She reached out to stroke Ledger's damp fur. Because he wasn't perfect enough for them. The weight of what had almost happened settled over the room. If Greer hadn't investigated her suspicions about that video, if she'd arrived even a few minutes later, she pushed the thoughts away. Ledger was safe now, and she had proof that his abandonment by his mother had been staged. Someone would answer for this. The fluorescent lights of Dr. Laurel, Pence's veterinary clinic, cast a harsh glow over the examination room. Greer stood close to the metal table where the tiny white puppy lay wrapped in warm towels, his chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Her clothes were still soaked and muddy from the rescue, but she couldn't bring herself to leave Ledger's side. Dr. Pence, a tall woman in her early 40s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, moved methodically through her examination. Her experienced hands checked Ledger's vital signs while her assistant dried his fur with a second towel. His body temperature is coming back up nicely, Dr. Pence said, checking the thermometer. No water in his lungs, thank goodness. You got to him just in time, Greer. Greer nodded, her throat tight. What about his overall health? Dr. Pence continued her examination, carefully checking Ledger's eyes, ears, and reflexes. Her brow furrowed slightly as she performed a series of tests, making small clicking sounds near the puppy's head. Ledger remained still, showing no reaction. I'm seeing something here, Dr. Pence said quietly. She moved to the other side of the table and repeated the tests. Ledger appears to be deaf. It's not uncommon in predominantly white dogs. It's linked to the same genes that cause their coloring. Greer's heart sank. But otherwise, he's perfectly healthy. Good weight, strong heartbeat, clear eyes. He's just ... Dr. Pence paused, choosing her words carefully, different. Before Greer could respond, the clinic's front door burst open with such force that the bell nearly flew off its mount. Heavy boots stomped down the hallway, and Boone Collister's large frame filled the doorway. His ruddy face was twisted with anger, expensive cowboy hat dripping rain onto the linoleum floor. There's my property, he growled, waving a stack of papers. That there's a cull from my breeding program. Greer instinctively stepped between Boone and the examination table. This puppy was found tied to a brick in a flooded culvert. That's criminal animal abuse, Mr. Collister. Boone's lip curled. That deaf mutt's worthless. You know the county rules, 72 hours for unadoptable animals. It's policy. He thrust the papers forward. Got all the documentation right here. That pup's part of my registered breeding program, and I got every right to determine which ones make the cut. Dr. Pence stepped forward, her voice steady but sharp. Being deaf doesn't make him unadoptable. Mr. Collister, he's a healthy puppy who deserves a chance at life. Don't you lecture me about my business. Doc, Boone snapped. I've been breeding champions for 25 years. Can't have defective stock ruining my reputation. The clinic's door chimed again, and 2 sheriff's deputies entered the room. Greer recognized them both. Brad Thompson and Mike Wheeler, regular hunting buddies of Boone's. Their expressions were carefully neutral, but their message was clear in their stance. Ma'am, Deputy Thompson said to Greer, Mr. Collister here has filed a complaint about stolen property. We need you to release the animal to its rightful owner. Greer's hands clenched into fists at her sides. Rightful owner? The one who tried to drown him? I found this puppy tied to a brick and left to die. That's not ownership. That's cruelty. Now, Miss Halstead, Deputy Wheeler cut in, his tone condescending. Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. The county has clear policies about these situations. Policies that protect abusers? Dr. Pence interjected, moving to stand beside Greer. I've documented every injury on this puppy. The rope burns around his belly, the hypothermia, the trauma. Boone stepped closer, using his height to loom over both women. You're interfering with legitimate business practices. That pup's part of my culling program. Got all the paperwork right here showing it's legal and proper. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Unless you ladies want to find yourselves on the wrong side of the law, you'll hand him over right now. Greer felt her chest tighten with anger and fear, but her voice remained steady. No, excuse me? Boone's face darkened. I said no. This puppy is evidence in an animal cruelty investigation. As an animal welfare officer, I'm placing him under protective custody, pending a full investigation. Deputy Thompson sighed. Miss Halstead, you know how this works. Mr. Collister's breeding program is registered with the county. He has the right to manage his stock as he sees fit. Management doesn't include attempted murder, Dr. Pence said firmly, picking up her medical chart. I'm putting my findings on record. This puppy shows clear signs of intentional harm. Boone's fake smile disappeared entirely. You're making a mistake. Both of you. There are ways things work around here, and there are consequences for folks who don't understand that. Are you threatening us, Mr. Collister? Greer asked, her gray eyes meeting his steadily. Just stating facts. That pup's going with me, one way or another. 72 hours, that's all you got before county policy kicks in. And good luck finding anyone around here willing to adopt a deaf dog with my breeding mark. He turned to the deputies. Make sure these ladies understand their obligations under the law. Deputy Wheeler stepped forward, hand resting meaningfully on his belt. Miss Halstead, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. But that animal is leaving with its registered owner today. Greer looked down at Ledger, who had slept through the entire confrontation. His small white body, still wrapped in towels, looked impossibly vulnerable on the steel examination table. She thought of the moment she'd pulled him from the water, how he'd trusted her completely even then. Get a warrant, she said quietly, her voice firm. Until then, this puppy stays under protective custody. If you want to arrest me for doing my job and saving a life, go right ahead. A tense silence filled the room. Dr. Pence moved closer to Greer, her presence steady and supportive. The deputies exchanged uncertain glances, while Boone's face grew darker with rage. 72 hours, he spat finally. Then that mutt's going right where it belongs. He turned and stormed out, his boots echoing down the hallway. The deputies lingered awkwardly. You're playing with fire, Greer, Deputy Thompson warned quietly before they both followed Boone out. When the door finally closed, Dr. Pence let out a long breath. Well, that was intense. Greer's hands were shaking as she reached down to stroke Ledger's fur. I've got 72 hours to figure out how to save him. We've got 72 hours. Dr. Pence corrected firmly. You're not in this alone. Ledger stirred slightly in his sleep, pressing his small body against Greer's hand. The gesture of trust made her throat tight. Boone Collister might have money, influence, and half the county in his pocket, but she had something he'd never understand, the unshakable certainty that every life had value, regardless of what anyone deemed as flaws. The morning sun filtered through the dusty blinds of Greer's small office as she studied the viral video for the 100th time. Her fingers traced the pause button, freezing frames that most viewers had missed in their rush to judgment. Something about the camera angle bothered her. It was too perfect, too steady for a random capture. A knock on her door made her look up. There stood a lanky young man with disheveled hair and a worn camera bag slung over his shoulder. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept much. Nico Bram, he introduced himself, shifting nervously. I heard you were looking into the white puppy video. Greer's eyes narrowed. You shot it? Yeah. He clutched his bag tighter. Look, I sell footage to news outlets. It pays the bills. But this one, something wasn't right. Sit down, Greer said firmly. Show me everything. For the next hour, they pored over Nico's raw footage. The metadata revealed multiple takes, carefully staged angles. Most damning were the background clips, Boone Collister's voice directing the scene, ensuring the mother dog appeared to reject her pup. He's done this before, Nico admitted, pulling up older files on his laptop. Whenever he gets what he calls imperfect stock, makes it look natural, like nature taking its course. Greer's jaw tightened as they reviewed case after case. Puppies with slight defects disappeared or humanely culled, as Boone's records claimed. The pattern was clear, but carefully hidden behind staged videos and falsified papers. Meanwhile, at Dr. Pence's clinic, Laurel was helping Greer work with Ledger. The white pup might be deaf, but his other senses were razor sharp. Greer developed a system of touch signals. A gentle tap on his shoulder meant, sit. A light stroke down his back for stay. Look at this, Greer demonstrated for Laurel one afternoon. She tapped Ledger's shoulder, and he sat immediately, blue eyes focused intently on her face. He reads body language better than most hearing dogs. Laurel nodded, making notes. His intelligence scores are off the charts. We need to document everything, prove he's not just trainable, but exceptional. They brought in retired Inspector Marcus Wheeler, who'd investigated animal welfare cases for 30 years, before Boone's influence forced him out. His weathered face creased with concern as he reviewed their evidence. Boone's got half the county board in his pocket. Wheeler warned, but his eyes sparked with determination. But this, the staged videos, the pattern of culling, Ledger's progress, it might be enough to force a proper investigation. Together, they built their case. Laurel compiled medical reports showing Ledger's perfect health aside from deafness. Nico provided unedited footage revealing Boone's deception. Wheeler contributed records of past complaints that had mysteriously disappeared from official files. Greer worked tirelessly with Ledger, documenting every achievement. The pup learned hand signals for complex commands in record time. He could find hidden objects using only scent and visual cues. His calm temperament made him ideal for therapy work. Watch this, Greer told her small team one evening. She set up an agility course in the clinic's backyard. Using only touch signals and body language, she guided Ledger through weaving poles, over small jumps, and through tunnels. The white pup moved with grace and confidence, never missing a cue. He's not just surviving, Laurel said softly. He's thriving, Wheeler nodded gruffly. This is what we needed, proof that Boone's whole culling, the weak philosophy is nothing but cruel profit-seeking. They worked late into the night, preparing their petition to block the 72-hour euthanasia order. Nico's technical skills proved invaluable, organizing their digital evidence into a compelling presentation. The board can't ignore this, he said, showing them the final compilation. Not with actual proof of staging, medical records, and Ledger's training progress all laid out. Greer watched Ledger sleeping peacefully in his bed beside her desk. The ugly marks where the twine had cut into him were healing, but they served as a constant reminder of what they were fighting against. We're not just saving one puppy, she told her allies. We're exposing a system that's allowed this cruelty for far too long. Laurel placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. And we're showing that every animal deserves a chance to prove its worth. Wheeler cleared his throat. I'll deliver the petition first thing tomorrow. Boone won't see it coming. He's too used to getting his way. As they gathered their materials, Ledger patted over to each person in turn, offering gentle nudges of encouragement. Even Nico, who'd admitted to being more of a cat person, couldn't resist scratching behind the pup's ears. Who would have thought, he mused, that the video I shot to make a quick buck would lead to all this? Greer watched her unlikely team, a compassionate vet, a reformed videographer, a retired inspector, and one extraordinary deaf puppy, and felt hope rise in her chest. Together, they had built something stronger than Boone's influence. The truth. They had the evidence. They had the documentation. Most importantly, they had Ledger himself, living proof that being different didn't mean being less valuable. Now they just had to make the county board see it too. The mounting evidence painted a clear picture of systemic abuse hidden behind a veneer of respectability. Boone's carefully crafted image as a responsible breeder was beginning to crack, revealing the ugly truth beneath. Every piece they uncovered made their case stronger. The stack of papers landed with a heavy thud on Greer's desk. She stared at the official complaint forms, her heart sinking as she read the accusations. Theft of property, criminal harassment, trespassing. Each charge bore Boone Collister's signature, the strokes angry and dark against the white paper. "He's trying to bury you in paperwork," Sheriff Deputy Morgan said, not meeting her eyes. "Claims you stole his property when you took that pup." Greer's hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages. "We both know Ledger was abandoned. Left to drown in that culvert. Maybe so." The deputy shifted uncomfortably. "But Boone's got friends in high places. Judge Carlton's already scheduled a hearing." After the deputy left, Greer sank into her chair, exhaustion weighing heavy on her shoulders. The clock on her wall ticked past 6 in the evening, but she couldn't bring herself to head home yet. Her phone buzzed with another message from Boone's lawyer, the third threatening email that day at her feet. Ledger dozed peacefully in his bed under her desk. The white puppy had grown stronger over the past week, responding beautifully to the touch-based training signals she'd developed. When she reached down to stroke his fur, he stirred and pressed his nose against her palm. "We're not giving up," she whispered. "Not now, not ever." Later that night, Greer jolted awake to the sound of car alarms and shouting. The orange glow through her bedroom window sent ice through her veins. She rushed to the window of her small apartment above the local hardware store, her heart stopping at the sight below. Her truck was engulfed in flames, the heat so intense it warped the metal of the vehicle parked next to it. The fire licked dangerously close to the building's wooden siding. Ledger whimpered from his crate as she grabbed him, her phone and her keys, running for the stairs. "Someone call 911. A neighbor shouted as Greer burst out the building's side door. The heat from the blaze hit her like a wall, and she stumbled backward, clutching Ledger to her chest. The puppy trembled against her. Fire trucks arrived within minutes, but by then her truck was nothing more than a blackened shell. The firefighters managed to keep the flames from spreading to the building, but the acrid smell of burnt rubber and melted plastic filled the air. "Found this," Fire Chief Roberts said grimly, holding up a charred gas can. This wasn't an accident. Greer stood barefoot on the sidewalk, still in her pajamas, as police took statements. She knew who was behind this. They all did, but proving it would be another matter entirely. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chun, brought her a cup of tea and a blanket for Ledger, clucking sympathetically. "You should be careful, dear," the elderly woman warned. "That Collister man, he's not used to people standing up to him." The next morning, running on barely 2 hours of sleep, Greer arrived at work in a borrowed car. She'd barely settled at her desk when Nico Bram appeared in her doorway, looking more disheveled than usual. "I saw what happened to your truck," he said, dropping into the chair across from her. "This has gone too far." Greer noticed dark circles under his eyes, his usual cynical expression replaced by something that looked like guilt. "Having second thoughts about your role in all this." Nico ran a hand through his messy hair. "I never thought. I mean, when Boone hired me to film that mother dog, he said it was just for documentation. Training purposes." He pulled out his worn camera bag. "But I've got the full footage." The unedited version shows him pushing the mother away from the pup, staging the whole thing. "You knew this whole time?" Greer's voice was quiet, but sharp. "I needed the money," Nico admitted, shame coloring his words. "Rent was due, and Boone pays well for footage that makes him look good. But after seeing what he did to your truck, ... He placed a memory card on her desk. "Here's everything. The original footage, other videos I've shot for him. Times, dates, locations. Some of it goes back months." Greer picked up the memory card, turning it over in her fingers. "This could help build a case against him. It might get me in trouble too," Nico said. "But I can't keep quiet anymore. Not when he's willing to put lives at risk just to protect his reputation. As if to emphasize the point, Ledger woke from his nap and padded over to Nico, placing a paw on his shoe. The gesture seemed to break something in the young videographer, and he reached down to pet the puppy with trembling fingers. "I'm sorry, little guy," he whispered. "I helped make you famous for all the wrong reasons." Greer spent the rest of the morning reviewing the footage, each new video adding to the weight of evidence against Boone. There were clips of other culled puppies, carefully staged scenes of rejection, even footage of money changing hands with local officials. Her phone rang. Dr. Laurel Pence from the vet clinic. "I heard about your truck," the vet said without preamble. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Greer assured her, though her hand still shook slightly when she thought about the flames. "But this proves Boone's desperate. He knows we're close to exposing him." "My offer still stands," Laurel said. "You and Ledger can stay at my place until this blows over. I've got plenty of room and security cameras." Greer looked down at Ledger, who had fallen asleep on her feet. The puppy trusted her completely, depending on her for protection. Running away felt like letting Boone win, but staying put might be foolishly dangerous. "I'll think about it," she promised. "Right now I need to focus on preparing for the hearing. With Nico's footage, we might finally have enough to stop Boone for good." After hanging up, Greer pulled out a fresh legal pad and began making notes. The theft charges, the harassment claims, even the truck fire. They were all signs of a desperate man losing control. Each act of intimidation only strengthened her resolve. She thought of all the animals who had suffered under Boone's cruel breeding practices, all the imperfect puppies discarded because they might damage his reputation. Looking at Ledger, who had proven himself capable of learning and loving despite his deafness, she knew she couldn't back down. The day stretched into evening as Greer worked, building her case piece by piece. When she finally looked up from her notes, the setting sun cast long shadows across her office floor. Ledger had moved to the window, his white fur glowing in the golden light, standing guard over his chosen protector. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Greer's office as she stared at the memory card Nico had just placed on her desk. Her hands trembled slightly as she inserted it into her computer, the weight of what she might discover making her heart race. "You need to see this first," Nico said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. He leaned over her shoulder and clicked through several folders until he found the file he wanted. "This is the raw footage from that day." The video began playing on her screen. Greer recognized the setting immediately, Boone's kennels, the same rustic buildings and worn fencing she'd seen in the viral clip. But this time, she was watching something entirely different unfold. Sable, the mother dog, lay peacefully in her pen, Ledger and his siblings nursing contentedly. There was no rejection, no pushing away. Instead, Sable nuzzled her white puppy with the same gentle attention she gave all her others. "Keep watching," Nico urged, his face tight with shame. A moment later, two figures entered the frame. Boone Collister's bulk was unmistakable, and beside him stood one of his handlers, a thin man in work clothes. They spoke in low voices, but the camera's microphone picked up their words clearly. "Get the mother out first," Boone instructed. "Then make it look good." Greer's stomach churned as she watched the handler roughly separate Sable from her puppies. The mother dog resisted, trying to return to her litter until they dragged her away. Then came the moment she'd seen in the viral video, but now she saw the truth. The handler physically pushed little Ledger away from his siblings, positioning him to look isolated and rejected. "They staged the whole thing," Greer whispered, her voice thick with anger. "There's more," Nico said quietly. He fast-forwarded through several clips, showing similar stage scenes with other puppies. "Boone has a system. Any pup that doesn't meet his standards gets the same treatment, staged rejection. Then ... double quote, he swallowed hard. Then they'd disappear." The next video showed something that made Greer's blood run cold. The same handler who had staged, Ledger's rejection was wrapping twine around a brick, the exact same type she'd found tied to Ledger in the culvert. "This ties him directly to what happened," she said, sitting up straighter. "This is proof," Nico nodded, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I should have come forward sooner. But Boone, he pays well to keep people quiet. I convinced myself it wasn't my business, that I was just doing my job. What changed?" Greer asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "Your truck," he replied, meeting her eyes. "That could have killed you." And seeing Ledger here, alive, knowing what they tried to do to him, ... quotes, he shook his head. "I couldn't live with myself anymore." Greer spent the next several hours going through every file on the memory card. Each video added another piece to the puzzle, revealing the full scope of Boone's operation. There were clips of money changing hands with local officials, conversations about handling problems, and numerous staged scenes of puppy rejection. Ledger lay at her feet as she worked, occasionally nudging her hand for attention. Looking down at him, she felt a new wave of anger. He wasn't just a survivor now, he was living proof of Boone's lies. Around noon, Dr. Laurel Pence arrived with lunch, having heard about the new evidence. The veterinarian pulled up a chair, her face grave as Greer showed her the footage. "This explains so much," Laurel said, watching a clip of Sable with her puppies. "That mother dog never showed any signs of aggression or rejection during my examinations. I couldn't understand why she would have turned on just one pup, because she didn't," Greer replied. "It was all manufactured to justify their culling practice. Create a viral story about a rejected pup, and nobody questions when it disappears. The public ate it up," Nico added from his corner. "My video got millions of views. People were calling Ledger worthless, saying it was nature's way ... quotes. His voice trailed off as Ledger padded over to him, placing a paw on his knee. The gesture seemed to break something in the young videographer, and he bent down to pet the puppy. "I'm so sorry, buddy. I helped them hurt you." Greer watched the interaction, seeing genuine remorse in Nico's face. "You're making it right now," she said softly. This evidence could stop Boone from hurting any more animals. They spent the afternoon organizing the footage and documenting everything. Greer created multiple backups, storing them in secure locations. She knew Boone would fight back hard once he realized his former videographer had turned against him. "What about Sable?" Laurel asked as they reviewed another clip. "She's still at Boone's kennel. One thing at a time," Greer replied, though her heart ached thinking about Ledger's mother. "First, we need to make sure these videos get to the right people. Then we can work on getting her out." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across her office floor, Greer felt a mix of hope and determination. The truth was finally coming to light. Boone's carefully constructed facade was cracking, revealing the cruelty beneath. Ledger had moved to the window, his white fur catching the golden light. He stood alert, watching the world outside with quiet dignity. Looking at him now, Greer saw more than just a deaf puppy who had beaten the odds. He was living proof that worth couldn't be measured by arbitrary standards, that every life deserved a chance. Nico gathered his things to leave, pausing at the door. "Be careful," he warned. "Boone's not going to take this lying down. When he figures out I gave you these videos ... we'll be ready," Greer assured him, though she knew the fight ahead would be brutal. The truck fire had already shown how far Boone would go to protect his interests, as if reading her thoughts. Laurel spoke up. "My offer still stands. You and Ledger can stay with me until this is over. I've got security cameras and plenty of room." Greer looked down at Ledger, who had returned to his spot at her feet. The puppy gazed back at her with complete trust, unaware of the storm gathering around them. She thought about her charred truck, about the countless other puppies who hadn't been as lucky as Ledger. Running away felt like letting Boone win, but staying put might be foolishly dangerous. The evidence they now had changed everything. It wasn't just about saving one puppy anymore. It was about exposing a system of cruelty that had operated unchecked for years. The viral video that had once painted Ledger as unwanted now stood revealed as a carefully crafted lie, one of many used to justify Boone's brutal practices. The next morning, Greer marched into the county courthouse with a thick folder of evidence under her arm. Ledger trotted beside her, his white coat gleaming in the early sunlight. The courthouse's marble halls echoed with their footsteps as they made their way to Judge Marion's chambers. "This better be important." "Ms. Halstead," the judge said, peering over her reading glasses at the stack of documents Greer placed on her desk. "Your Honor, I have evidence of systematic animal cruelty and fraud at Boone Collister's breeding operation." Greer's voice was steady as she presented the unedited footage, veterinary records, and witness statements. "We need an emergency injunction to stop more puppies from being killed." Judge Marion's expression grew darker as she reviewed the materials. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, she looked up. "I'm granting the injunction. I'm also authorizing an immediate inspection of the premises. Within 2 hours, a team of state investigators, local police, and animal welfare officers descended on Boone's property." Greer stood at the front gate, Ledger secure in her vehicle, as Boone came storming out of his house. "This is harassment," he shouted, his face red with fury. "You have no right." The lead investigator simply handed him the court order. "Step aside, Mr. Collister." As they entered the kennel area, the scale of Boone's deception became clear. File cabinets revealed carefully doctored breeding records, with disappeared puppies marked as transferred or adopted. The real numbers didn't match the official registry counts. "Look at this," called one investigator, holding up a ledger book. "He's been falsifying documentation for years. These adoption papers are all forged." In the kennel runs, they found dozens of dogs living in substandard conditions. Many showed signs of neglect, matted fur, untreated injuries, and fearful behavior. Among them was Sable, Ledger's mother, who cowered in the corner of her pen. Greer knelt by Sable's cage, speaking softly. "We're going to get you out of here, girl. I promise." The raid continued throughout the afternoon. Evidence bags filled with documents, computers were seized, and photographs documented everything. Veterinarians examined each dog, creating detailed health reports that would later become court evidence. Boone watched it all with barely contained rage, his expensive boots caked with mud as he paced. His lawyer arrived, speaking in urgent whispers, but even he looked worried as box after box of incriminating records were carried out. "This operation is finished," the lead investigator told Greer. "We've got enough here for multiple felony charges." Relief flooded through her, but it was tempered by concern for the animals. "What about the dogs?" "They'll be placed in protective custody at approved shelters, including this little guy's mother." He nodded toward Ledger, who sat alertly in Greer's truck, watching the proceedings through the window. As the day wore on, something nagged at Greer's instincts. The numbers still didn't add up. Even with all the falsified records, there should have been more puppies. Where had they gone? Then she overheard 2 workers talking as they loaded equipment into a van. "What about the old Thompson barn?" one asked quietly. "Boss said never to mention that place," the other hissed, glancing nervously at Boone. Greer's heart dropped. The Thompson property bordered Boone's land. She remembered passing an old barn on her drives out here. It wasn't listed in any of the kennel permits or inspection reports. She watched Boone carefully and noticed how his eyes kept darting toward the tree line that marked his property's eastern border. Something was there, something he was desperate to keep hidden even now. But before she could investigate further, the lead investigator called everyone together. "We're wrapping up for today. The property is sealed. No one comes in or out without authorization." Greer knew she should feel triumphant. The raid had uncovered more than enough evidence to shut down Boone's operation. Ledger and his mother would be safe. Yet that whispered conversation about the Thompson barn haunted her. What other secrets was Boone hiding out there in the shadows? As she drove home that evening, Ledger curled up in the passenger seat. She couldn't shake the feeling that this victory, however significant, was incomplete. Something darker lurked beyond the tree line, in an unlisted barn that no one was supposed to mention. The setting sun cast long shadows across the rural landscape, and somewhere in those shadows, Greer feared more animals needed her help. But for now, she had to focus on securing the evidence they'd gathered and ensuring all the seized dogs received proper care. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and perhaps answers about that mysterious barn dot as dusk approached. Greer and Nico followed the groundskeeper's directions through the dense woods. The setting sun cast long shadows between the trees when they spotted smoke rising ahead. No! Greer broke into a run, Nico close behind with his camera. Through the trees, orange flames were already climbing the weathered walls of a hidden barn structure. The heat hit them like a wall as they approached. Then they heard it, desperate scratching and whimpering from inside. "There are dogs in there!" Greer shouted, spotting Boone's truck speeding away down a narrow dirt track. Without hesitation, Greer kicked in the side door. Smoke poured out as she and Nico plunged inside. Cages lined the walls, filled with terrified puppies. Dozens of them, all with visible imperfections like Ledger's dot as they started freeing the dogs. A thunderous crack split the air. Greer looked up just as a burning beam crashed down. She shoved Ledger, who had followed them in, clear of danger but couldn't move fast enough herself. The beam pinned her legs, and searing pain shot through her body. "Get the dogs out!" She yelled to Nico between coughs. "I'll figure something out." Ledger, instead of running to safety, stayed close to Greer. His blue eyes locked with hers, and in that moment, she saw pure determination. All their training sessions, all the touch signals they'd practiced, it hadn't just been about proving his worth. It had prepared him for this. "Go help them, boy," she whispered, making the hand signal they'd practiced for find. Understanding blazed in Ledger's eyes. He darted through the thickening smoke, guiding frightened puppies toward the door where Nico was helping them escape. A dark shape emerged from the haze, Sybil, Ledger's mother, who must have been kept here as well. Instead of fleeing, she joined her son, nudging terrified pups toward safety. Together, mother and son worked in perfect sync, their white and black coats moving through the smoke like light and shadow, leading one group after another to freedom while flames consumed the barn around them. Through her pain, Greer watched in awe as Ledger, the pup everyone had dismissed as worthless, became a hero before her eyes. Each successful rescue was proof of what she'd known all along, that his true worth lay not in fitting some breeder's standard of perfection, but in his heart and spirit. As the flames died down and the morning sun broke through the smoke, investigators moved carefully through the barn's remains. Despite Boone's attempt to destroy evidence, the truth couldn't be erased so easily. Metal tags, microchips, and branded markings on the rescued dogs told their own story. "Look at this," a forensics expert called out, holding up a partially melted collar with clear registration numbers. "These match the missing dogs from those falsified records." Nico didn't waste any time. With trembling hands, he uploaded both the uncut footage of the staged abandonment and new video of Ledger's heroic rescue to social media. The contrast was stark, the manufactured cruelty versus the truth of both Ledger's and Sybil's courage. "People need to see this," he muttered, adding detailed captions explaining how Boone had orchestrated the deception. All of it, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Local news stations picked up the story, and within hours, the footage went viral, this time exposing Boone's lies. Comments flooded in, demanding justice. Phone lines at the sheriff's office rang constantly as angry citizens called for action. Sheriff Drake, who had long looked the other way, found himself under intense public scrutiny. With mounting pressure and irrefutable evidence, he could no longer protect his old friend. "Get units to all exit routes," he ordered his deputies. "Boone Collister is to be arrested on sight." They caught up with Boone at the county line. He had his prized breeding stud, Champion's Glory, loaded in a trailer and was heading for the state border. The sheriff himself made the arrest, reading out charges that seemed to go on forever: animal cruelty, arson, fraud, falsifying records, attempted murder. As Boone was led away in handcuffs, his face was a mask of fury and disbelief. His carefully constructed empire of lies had crumbled, exposed by the very animals he had deemed worthless. Back at the scene, investigators continued documenting evidence that would ensure Boone Collister would face justice for his crimes. In the quiet aftermath of Boone's arrest, Greer sat on her back porch, watching Ledger and Sable play in the fenced yard. The white pup bounced through the grass, his mother following with gentle patience. Though deaf, Ledger had learned to read Sable's body language perfectly, responding to her subtle movements and expressions. "I never thought I'd end up here," Greer admitted to Nico, who sat beside her with a cup of coffee. "I always kept my distance. Professional boundaries, you know." Nico nodded, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes life has other plans. The adoption papers lay on the table between them, already signed and notarized. After years of helping animals find homes with others, Greer had finally opened her own home and her heart. The decision hadn't been easy, but watching Ledger rescue those pups from the burning barn had shown her something profound about connection and trust. "They're quite a pair," Nico observed as Sable guided Ledger away from a thorny bush with a gentle nudge. The older dog had healed well under Greer's care, her protective instincts now channeled into positive interaction rather than fear-driven responses. "3," Greer corrected, glancing at Nico with a small smile. His constant presence over the past weeks had become a comfort she hadn't expected. "Maybe 4, if you count that stray cat that keeps showing up for dinner." She stood, using the special whistle and wave combination that called Ledger to her. Though he couldn't hear the whistle, he'd learned to watch for the signal. The white pup bounded over, Sable following at a more dignified pace. Greer's hands moved in the touch-based commands they'd developed together, and Ledger responded with enthusiastic understanding. "You know," she said, scratching behind Ledger's ears, "everyone thought he was worthless because he was different. But being different just meant he needed someone to see his true value." She looked at her unlikely family, a deaf pup, a healing mother dog, and a reformed videographer. "Sometimes the best families are the ones we choose." Nico reached down to pat Sable, who had finally learned to trust his touch. "And sometimes the best stories aren't the ones we first set out to tell." Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.